coming up next, Maya Lau was an investigative reporter for the Los Angeles Times. Her work has revealed names on a secret list of sheriff's deputies with histories of misconduct. Remember that investigation that made nationwide news, prompted the district attorney to review press criminal cases featuring some of those officers. She dove into cases like that as an investigative reporter. Now she's diving into your wallet. How do you spend money? How much money do you make? She's talking OPP, other people's pockets, on a brand new, intriguing podcast. And I'm super happy she's here in Mom's Basement with us. The person with the real OPP, other people's pockets, Maya Lau, joins us. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Was that intentional, by the way? Everybody in the Stacking Benjamins universe, including Mom, she might have asked you this upstairs, Maya, wants to know, was OPP intentional? It
was just, something that came up. Somebody came up with the name Other People's Pockets, and we're like, OPP, how do we feel about that? And we're like, let's lean into it. So we're going with that.
Well, we got it right away. So there it is. We're not the smartest people. As you found out already, we are not the smartest people on earth. Why you, Maya, and why this project?
Well, I thought of it. I don't know.
Did you? Was it your idea?
Yes.
You pitched it?
Oh, yeah. This is all my fantasy. So I started working on this in the sense of like thinking about it and wanting to do it maybe 3 years ago. And I was a newspaper reporter. I was at the LA Times at the time. I had been a newspaper reporter several years, journalist almost a decade. And increasingly, I just started to find my interest drifting more in the direction of like money and being frustrated with money, feeling like, there's a real ceiling in terms of what newspaper reporters can earn, which of course I had always been fine with, especially in my 20s. But then as I got into my 30s, my mid 30s, I was like, I think I want to make some more money in my life. And I started to ask people outside of work, either people who'd left journalism or other people I knew in my life, like, what is your career like and how much money do you make? And it was always the most interesting part of my day after I had had those conversations to talk to my husband at the end of the day and be like, guess who I talked to? And guess how much money they made? There's this financial voyeurism, this sense of like, oh, interesting. Like maybe it's a little more than you thought or a little less, or maybe they actually make most of their money from this other thing you didn't even know they did on the side or whatever. And I just started to feel like, it feels kind of basic, but I kind of want to do a podcast where I just ask people how much money they make. In part because I also just believe in salary transparency. And, at the LA Times, I was underpaid. I know that because it came out as part of a lawsuit. There was a union push. There's a lot of talk about salary transparency and the need for it. And so this project kind of came about in a similar vein of, I'm curious and nosy, and I want to kind of figure out, like, I learn a lot from individual people's stories. Like, if you could like pull your mom, pulling her aside and being like, okay, what's your story with money? Even if you've made mistakes, like, I just want to hear, how did that work for you? So yeah, that it just came about because of that. And I pitched it and I got to work with this great podcast company, Little Everywhere, that I'm still working with. Eventually we were able to get a distributor, Pushkin Industries. And it's just kind of an exercise in sort of asking the money questions that you don't necessarily feel comfortable asking. Like, I felt like there was a lot of money podcasts that were talking about money, around money. But whenever I would listen to them, I'd be like, how much money do you make? And so I think it's also the investigative reporter in me that is like, let's just ask these questions that make people maybe feel a little uncomfortable. But I think that everyone secretly wants to hear these answers.
Can we go back to salary transparency for a second? Because if your podcast and listening to all of your episodes, it truly is about transparency. You're asking these people some questions. We'll play some clips here in a minute, Maya, for everybody so that they get a taste of just some of these questions that you're asking people. And I've been doing this a long time, and I even went, wow, like she goes right there. But I can understand why we might not talk about religion, why we might not talk about sex. Those may make things very awkward. I never got the money piece. Like, I understand why employers don't want you to talk to somebody else at the Times or wherever about what your paycheck is. I don't want anybody to know that. I don't understand why workers don't share that with each other. Why do you think that is in the first place?
Well, I do think it's changing. Definitely younger people are more open about this and are like, yeah, we're friends. Let's just talk about this. But I think that there's just, for a lot of people, there's this ingrained belief that it's rude to talk about money, that it will create further divides between people, that it's just not good to focus on it. It's not good to it's just like, would you just randomly get naked in front of your coworker? Like, it just feels like, no, we don't do that. But I do think that it's changing. And I think that people are starting to realize that knowledge is power. And, the secrecy really tends to just benefit the employer. I mean, that's why they want to keep it secret, so that everyone doesn't start talking and start asking for more money and start going out for other jobs.
Yeah, because I can think of very few of those conversations that I've had, very open, honest conversations like your podcast about money, where I truly felt awkward around the person afterwards. I mean, definitely if we went too far talking about religion or sex, then sometimes it got really awkward. But money, I didn't feel that much. I want to ask you about this, though. You talk about your background in journalism. You write on your LinkedIn profile this. I found this fascinating. I truly learned how to knock on doors and dig up documents by moving to Louisiana, and I stopped, and working in the small newsroom of the Shreveport Times. It's like, that's right down the road, Maya.
Yeah.
You could come over. You could hang out more often. Tell me, what did you learn in Shreveport that really helped your career?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, to preface this, I was at the New York Times before that. That's where I started my career in journalism.
That is a bold move.
Yeah, I mean,
to Shreveport.
But I was a news assistant at the New York Times. So I was like bottom of the barrel. Like, I wasn't a reporter. I wasn't an editor. But I was doing a lot of administrative stuff and helping to run one of the blogs. And that path was there was sort of a lot of people would have stayed and did stay at the New York Times, kind of moving up slowly, kind of going the web editor route or whatever. And I just felt like, I don't know that I'm learning what I need to actually learn to be a reporter here. And I had some mentors who were like, yeah, you're not going to learn. I mean, you could, but it would take a longer time. To learn to be a reporter, generally speaking, you need to go to a smaller market. You need to have more hands-on experience and, be out in the field every day. And so that's what I mean about that's where I really actually learned how to be a reporter. So I moved to Shreveport. I was a crime reporter. So then, every day you're out, you're knocking on doors, you're going to crime scenes, you're making sources. I had an editor there who had a very investigative bent. Just the questions she would ask me about a story were yeah, but how do they pay for that? And where did that money come from? And, all these kind of questions that were always going deeper. And I think it started to train my mind to think in that way. And it also, it worked with how I already thought, but that hadn't been sharpened enough. So yeah, I think just having the experience of being, you have more agency when you're the person who has to write this big story. It's not you're helping on a story. It's your byline. You've got to turn it in. You've got to get all the quotes. You've got to make the sources. And it just teaches you to really dig and to how to, both have the people skills to get people to talk to you and to have the skills of I'm going to confront you, depending on who you're talking to. So
yeah, there's no backup. Nobody else is going to ask the tough question behind you.
Yeah. It's and we had just such a small staff too. So yeah.
Your episodes for Other People's Pockets are very much all over the place. And I want to talk about that, where I just look at the first 4 episodes as we record this that you've done. And these people are so iconic and so different from each other. Let's start here on episode number 2. You feature, this guy, This is somebody that I think our listeners, they might have heard this voice before. You ask him to identify himself and he says this.
Sure. I'm Adam Davidson. I was a business and economics journalist for a long time at Marketplace, the public radio show, then NPR, where I created Planet Money with a friend of mine. And then I went to the New York Times Magazine as economics writer, where I met you. And then I went to the New Yorker as economics writer. And I wrote a book called The Passion Economy. As I turned 50, I decided I don't want a job. I don't want a boss. So I just do a lot of different things now. TV stuff, not TV stuff.
He just does a bunch of different things now, Maya. He just, casually does all these things. I think when Adam Davidson, who was on the show, by the way, talking about the Passion Economy, about that book, when he talks about his friend, I think that's Alec Bloomberg. He's talking
Alex
about
Bloomberg, yeah.
it. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I mean, Adam was an interesting guest because he really was pretty open about talking about his money. We really, there's different kinds of guests. Like there's some guests who they're okay sharing to a certain point, but money isn't really something they think about and talk about all the time. So the more you go, the more you might be like pushing them and making them feel uncomfortable. And then in the rest of the interview, they might be closed off. Whereas he writes about the economy, money is something he's thought about for years. I think he still maybe felt a little bit uncomfortable with the depth we went to, but like he can do it, he can handle it. And, I think it's so interesting, like the idea of like, okay, so you're this really cerebral, high-minded thinker on money. Like, what does your own bank account look like? Does it translate? Like, what does it translate to?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask about the prep for these shows. Like they generally look to run around 40 minutes and you dive in, and then I feel like it gets a little lighter, and then you dive in again, and then it gets lighter. But tell me, how do you walk us behind the scenes? How do you design your episodes?
Well, we record usually for an hour and a half, and then it gets cut down, and all the episodes are edited. So like something we may have talked about at the end could be put at the beginning or whatever. It's not necessarily exactly the order that you hear it in. And for that reason, we can't actually just put it all on YouTube with video because you can't edit. I don't know how you would edit. The video would look all like jumbled.
Lots of cutaways and B-rolls, Maya.
Yes.
That's what we do.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that I usually try to structure it like I do any interview or conversation where it's a little bit of like, tell me about yourself. And, people usually, the listener needs to hear some of that background, and people tend to like talking about themselves. So it kind of is like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe a little bit relaxing. And then, I don't know. I mean, sometimes we do this like cold shower thing in the beginning where it's like, okay, this is uncomfortable. Let's get over with the money, like the hard money questions. Like, how much money do you make? Like, we just start this like lightning round at the beginning versus doing a lightning round at the end. We don't always do that. I don't know. Can I
go ahead and play one of those? Because we've got
Sure.
Adam Davidson on one end, who's been doing this forever. And episode 4, actually episode 1, 2, and 3, pretty iconic people. Episode 4, you interview somebody I think 99.99999% of us will not know. Her name is
Carmen. But you
Carmen.
should, because she's awesome.
she was a badass. She was incredible. And you open up the episode this way, to your point. This is the beginning of episode 4 of Other People's Pockets.
Carmen, welcome to Other People's Pockets.
Hi, I'm super excited to be here and talk with you.
We're going to start with a cold shower. A lot of podcasts have a lightning round at the end, and we're going to do it in the beginning just to be different. Are you ready?
Cool. Yep.
Who are you?
I'm Carmen.
How much money do you make?
Currently $900 a month.
Have you ever talked publicly about your finances before?
Nope.
And how do you feel about talking about your finances and about financial transparency in general?
The word that comes to my mind is icky.
It sounded like that surprised you a little, which she said icky.
Yeah, a little bit, because she's also very open and funny and irreverent. So I was like, oh, but yeah, I mean, she's great. I just love that she, she has a different perspective where she really is all about like sharing and taking care of her community. I didn't want to do a show that's like, okay, these are all people that are like rich or like going to teach you how to be rich or whatever. Like maybe some of them are, but maybe some of them aren't. And they don't really think about money that way. So I thought that she's just really fun to talk to. Because I just think that, hearing just normal people, like, I don't think that I just don't think the point is to like only hear from like people who make six figures. Like, hopefully we're going to have enough variety that it's not all that.
And I was thinking about constructing a show like yours. For a lot of these people, for all the reasons we've talked about previously, you'd have to warm people up. You'd have to get them comfortable saying the stuff out loud. You must have known something about Carmen ahead of time to just go right at her. Your second question, how much do you make? She makes less than $12,000 a year.
Mm-hmm. And lives with her parents. Yeah.
Yeah. And she said it right away. Like, is that just based on your guess? Do you know when ahead of time when you can go there, when you have to kind of roll into it slowly?
Yeah. I mean, we do screen people ahead of time and say, hey, we'd love to have you on our show. This is what our show is about. The heart of our show is asking people how much money they make. So how do you feel about that? If they're like, absolutely not, I wouldn't even share a range, I will not talk, then it's like, you're probably not the right fit for our show, But if they're like, yeah, that's cool, or like, I'm okay sharing a range, or I'm okay, whatever. If they kind of get what the point is, then, so there's that pre-screening that goes on. But I think that I'm just always trying to read like where someone's at and like read their energy. And I also I do have a lot of questions, because that's just the fun part for me is like, oh my God, I can think of 1,000 questions I want to ask you. But during it, I'm also really just listening and just like, oh, well, here's another question. I try not to make it like a questionnaire. So I think to your point of like, how do you kind of like move with them to make them comfortable? I don't know. I think just it's the same that any person would do in a conversation. Like, oh, I feel like we could like go here now, or oh, like let's back off. We're getting, too bogged down in the details, and this isn't feeling energetic. So
it certainly is fun for the listener, because as I was going through the first episodes, like the fact that sometimes it's early, sometimes it's late, but we know the question's coming. And just as an example, you go there at the 20-minute mark with Adam. Let's listen to this one, because all of a sudden, you just ask this.
How much would you say you'll probably take home this year?
Maybe like 340, something like that. I'm not sure.
What's the most money you've ever made in a year?
7 something, I think. This is my worst year of take-home pay in many, many years. I mean, I've made over 500 almost every year since I think 2015.
And then he goes into the why, and we'll let people listen to the why. And it actually is very interesting to see what he's building and see what he's doing. But when he says this is his worst year, I don't think there's a lot of people, Maya, giving our friend Adam any empathy.
Like feeling sad. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he was like trying to elicit sympathy. I think he was just trying to say that like this year I will bring home the least. But yeah, I mean, I think that what's interesting for that is like, he and I are in the same profession, and I always internalize the message that like journalists don't make a lot of money by and large. Don't expect it. Do it for the social mission. And it's kind of eye-opening to see like you could make good money if you want to. And part of that is being an entrepreneur, like not working at a set company, but, having different things that you can do and be creative with your time. And so I think that part of it is just, it's kind of interesting and even inspiring to be like, this thing that I thought about this profession, like I've talked to plenty of other journalists who listen to that episode, and they're like, I never knew that I could make that much money or that somebody could, and it's just sort of like, huh.
It is inspiring. I found myself inspired because, and you know what inspired me, Maya, is the fact that he's so damn casual about it. The fact that for him, it didn't feel like it was a status symbol or was a, hey, I'm holding this over your head, or I can buy this many Maseratis or whatever it was. It was just a number, and the fact that he put it out there, I thought, wow, it just very casual. It was very cool.
Well, and then he admitted like he really hasn't saved as much as he should over the years. So, like you can earn a lot and then you can spend a lot, and, he's not happy about his saving habits. So yeah, it's all very real.
We plan our Stacking Benjamins episode 5 weeks out. I'm wondering, I think, for a lot of podcasts like ours, that's a long time, but I think that you guys got to start planning way before that for your show, I would think.
Well, we've been working on it for a long time, and we've already recorded maybe 20 episodes because we were recording before we even had a partnership with Pushkin, and we were like started to make the show so that once we pitched it to a distributor, we were like, we have this show. It's not a concept. It's an actual show
here.
That's ready to air. And so we actually do have a lot banked. And yeah, I mean, I think that there is, it's not a show where it's like, oh, we're just going to schedule someone and they're going to come on and we're going to, because we do sometimes interview people and it's just not good, or they're not giving us anything. And it's like, we have to kill this episode. So yeah, I mean, planning is also good for one's peace of mind.
Right. Well, I think it also makes it so that the number of times you're actually on a mic talking to the wrong person is minimized.
Yeah.
Because who wants to waste all that time? I mean, do it in the pre-prep. The cool thing about the show, I thought more than anything, and I'm going to play one more clip here for you, Maya, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Which is going back to Carmen. This is not truly about money. It really is about dreams. And you ask Carmen a little bit about her dreams and where she's going, and she shares. And I want to play just a little clip from kind of what's on her mind.
And we're both. She takes photos. She's a photographer. She's younger than me, so our dream has been to like create a magazine where I write
cool.
and she like
That's awesome.
takes photos. So maybe that will be in the plans.
Yeah.
Like I'm very much like, I love creating things, so I see myself doing that. And I don't know, you don't really earn a lot of money, so I'm very like aware that I'm going into this with not earning a lot of money when you like create things and like try new things. So I'm very aware of the lifestyle I might have.
She's so realistic. She's so it just struck me, and I found myself pulling for her, going, no, you can.
Yeah,
you can make
me
a lot
too.
of money.
Me too. I mean,
this.
I think that being creative and being resourceful are the skills that you need. Those are the skills that can lead to making more money if you want to. Like, I don't believe in this idea of like, well, if you're a creative, like you've signed up for, you've taken a vow of poverty. Like, I think that like entrepreneurs are creative, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can use your creativity. So I kind of I actually did tell her that, and then it got cut, but like, don't sell yourself short. But I think like, yeah she's also like she's also, taking the bus versus like driving a car, and she hasn't saved for a car. And she told her parents, like, I'm okay, I'm thriving. Like, she just she has like the things that matter to her. And I think that what was cool too is like, we're getting all these people, but her in like this very specific period of time, like she's in her early 20s. And what does money look like at that point? Because I do think your priorities change over time, and it might be interesting to interview her again in 10 years and be like, so now how do you feel about money or whatever? Yeah. So
almost like you said, you feel different now, right?
Totally.
You're like, hey,
completely. Yeah.
Well, that's what scares me about young people in the FIRE movement who say, I'd be okay living in a tent the rest of my life. I'm like, you're 24.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you at 55, I'm way too bougie for that.
Oh my gosh. I served in the Peace Corps, and like I was 25 at the time. Totally fine with sleeping on random floors. Like I could actually sleep, which is when you're older, you just can't sleep very well. And so, and like I could sleep on a hammock. I was just totally like all over the place. And yeah, I think so much of that fire stuff is like, I want to be like, but is this just your personality? Like you just like, because some people just are just minimalist type people. And it's not like that they're more virtuous or anything. It's just like, that just works for you. But yeah, is it always going to work for you? Yeah, I don't know.
I just have one more question. I talked about some of the great stuff I got out of your show. What do you hope people get out of Other People's Pockets?
I really hope that what people get out of it is that they might feel inspired to ask people in their lives how much money they make, in a spirit of curiosity and maybe to help them negotiate a raise for themselves. I hope to kind of normalize this conversation. I also just really hope that finding out someone else's numbers can be like just information that's interesting. I think that obviously it's understandable that someone would hear, if you hear about somebody else making like millions of dollars a year, it just feels like, man, like I don't relate to that. Like, God, like I want to turn off this podcast and now I feel shitty about myself. But like, I guess my hope is that like, it's also just a data point and I'm not trying to take away like, the very real forces that go into like why people get paid more or less. But like, just that this is like information, similar to sex, how like it used to be just like, you don't talk about it. It's like, you know what, we need to just kind of talk about it, get used to like these numbers being out there and, get used to this being a conversation that we need to have because the secrecy, I just don't think helps most people.
It's called Other People's Pockets. You can get it wherever you're listening to us now. Maya, thanks for hanging out with our stackers and giving us kind of a behind the scenes tour. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.